Hello, everyone. Can you hear us? Hopefully you can hear us.
This is like transmitting from a different planet. There's like a 15-second lag.
Yeah, we're coming from Mars.
Don't say Mars. Elon Musk might try to buy us.
Oh, no. I mean, if he wants to. They hear us.
Excellent.
Yep, there's quite a bit of lag there. All right, everyone. We're just going to go ahead with a quick introduction here. Dax will be showcasing new features in 1.3.1. And then we're gonna have a quick Q&A towards the end, and I'll just keep an eye on all the chat going on. So if you have any questions, if you're on the Discord, paste them in the QA chat that I created. If you're on the forums, paste in the post of the post them in the thread that I created there, or I will keep an eye on the YouTube chat. It just gets a little bit more difficult to keep an eye on that because you guys kind of stumble on each other. But it's okay. We'll go ahead. I'll give the floor to Dex.
Hey, thank you. Someone's saying they can barely hear me. How about now? Can you guys hear me now? See, I'll switch to the actual good stuff. And okay, so I guess let's start with like a very quick introduction to Gaia, just in case for any people who are new or who are, they haven't seen what's. Oh, very little volume change. Let me see. Okay, how's this? Because if this doesn't work, I'll have to yell, and it's 2:40 a.m. and I'm sure that'll cut the stream short very quickly. So okay, I think okay, it's a bit better. Okay, cool. So I'll start. So okay, so Gaia, for some of you might not know, it's a procedural terrain design software. It's been around for a while, and we just released version 1.3. And today I will show you some of the cool new features we added. And basically it's always been about like, let's make it easier and faster to create realistic terrains. So this, I think with this latest release, it's the some of the best work that the team has created. And I will just I made this scene a bit earlier to show you guys what you can do now. The setup is pretty simple. Like, don't worry about everything on the far right side. That's just color. Everything that creates the shape is just this long train right here. And this is, what you can create with the new nodes. And this was inspired by so many of the sandstone formations in Utah. And it's one of the favorite places. We actually learned a lot there. So anyway, so always wanted to create that. And one of the new nodes that we just introduced called Crumble lets you create these gorgeous crevices and everything. So I'll make a terrain from scratch in a moment. Just I want to quickly show you how simple this whole setup is. So the first node is just a slump. I'll actually turn off the atmosphere so you can see. It's just a, one of the geo primitives. It's pretty much default settings. Just fiddled with the seed a bit. I'll zoom in, and so there's the next one, wizard. And with wizard, we're just doing just a little bit of erosion because the previous one was a bit plain and had like a noise-like texture. And then next we add crumble, and you can see it dramatically alters everything. It's kind of like a super erosion thing. And it uses the erosion data that already exists in the terrain, and it can start eating away at the edges, so as you can see here. So it's a very different kind of erosion from things you may have used in CG terrains before. So with this, it creates these amazing flows that we can then leverage. Of course, why use one when you can use two? So a second crumble, and again, you can see these are just default settings. It it deepens it even further, adds a lot of tiny little detail. So you can see here all the rock flow and so on, even in the crevices. And it actually has a very specific way of carving out the edges, as you can see here, where it is non-uniform. It actually looks at the local shapes when it does that. And then, of course, hey, why use two when you can use three, right? So with this one, I did change the settings. There's like a lot of rock hardness and a lot of down cutting. And we'll get into the settings later. They're not really all that important. But what we're doing is just basically isolating these larger bulbous shapes. So if I go back, you can see these. And then here you can see, yeah, it's even deeper. And then we use one of the other nodes that we introduced in the previous build a few weeks ago. It's called the outcrops node, and it adds rocks. So we take our existing terrain, and you can see it started adding these rock clusters and outcrops everywhere. And right now I have it set to small clusters. You can set it to entire surface, large clusters, and so on. And you can choose the amount of detail that the surface of the rocks has, and so on. So anyways, this starts breaking up that somewhat regular look that we were getting. So if I go back, you can see there, it's great. It is, you normally would not call it regular, but when I say regular, there's a single simulation going on everywhere for this erosion. So we break that up by adding these rocks, because you have protruding rocks everywhere, almost everywhere in the world. And so once that's done, we're pretty much, the core shape is done. The rest is just transforming this into a terraced landscape. And just before we do that, you can see, even in streaming quality, you'll notice that there's so much crunchy little detail, and you don't always want that, especially when you're dealing with, say, a substance like sandstone, which can get fused with heat and so on. So I'm going to use the new thermal shaper that we shipped in 1.3, and yeah, all of these nodes are available. I'm using the version that we shipped today. It's available on the website. You can download it and start playing with it right now. So Thermal Shaper is a lightweight version of thermal erosion, and it can quickly help you condense shapes and heat fuse them together. So that's what I'm doing here. And you can see, yes, it starts looking a bit too bulbous now, but we're gonna set that aside for now, because the main shape that we get is with fractal terrace. So the moment we add fractal terrace, there we go, we have this. The only change that I've made to the defaults is I have the shape at a high value, and that's so it creates these smoother, rounded out terraces rather than the sharper ones. And then for I don't want them to be too uniform. So for that, we use modulation, the second port you see here, and that's being fed a gradient, which has been clamped. So it's like, it's not that tall. And then also adding a bit of displacement on it. here in the post-process stack. So this is modulating our terraces, and that creates that slightly uneven look. So now the last bit, and that is like this top part is a bit too much for me. I just want to have it be flatter. So I'm just going to use soft clip here. It just flattens it. It's just like clamp, but just does it softly. And that's pretty much our terrain. Next, I add the Arboreal node. That's the new one that we just shipped today. And I'm using the shrubs growth type. So it's now adding little shrubs everywhere. And again, don't worry about the how. I'll start a new scene and show you how this works from scratch. I just might not get the same seed on some of these nodes. I just want you to see the shape first. So anyways, layer on a bit more growth, and then we do a bit of combining and this and that and a bit of coloring, and we have this final terrain. So with all kinds of non-uniform shapes to the side and the kind of heat fused sandstone you would expect in an environment like that. So, okay, anyways, enough of this. I'll just start a new scene. And let's see, I will add a slump, kind of like the same one that we were using before. And I'll switch the resolution to 1K so we see a bit more detail, but it still remains pretty fast. You can, for those of you who are not too familiar with the interface, you have the toolbox here. You can drag and drop things. I'm just going to use the tab key to do search, like so. Or I might drag out and let go and then select something here or type something to get a node. So for the slump, I'll just add just a tiny bit of erosion. So I'll add the wizard node because I don't really want to fiddle with the settings. I just need something simple and basic. So that's kind of okay, but I want a pitted surface. So I will choose pitted surface in one of the presets for phase 2, hit apply. Since this is a heavy node, it doesn't automatically apply for you. And you can see it now has that pitted surface post erosion. Then let's add one more erosion, so another wizard node. And in this one, I'm gonna have let's see, I'll have high sediment removal. So instead of filling it up or filling the crevices up, the crevices become a bit more exposed. So that gives us a little something to work with. And now I'm seeing we don't have enough slopes. So I'll go back to slump. Let's try a couple of seeds. Oh, there, that looks good. That has something a bit higher up. So let's see, last one. Oh, there we go. Okay, so with the last wizard, we now get all of this, and we can let crumble loose on this. So I've been, last few weeks of testing, I've been adding this node so much, it's right up here in my suggested nodes. So I'll add that. And let's see what this node actually does. So I'll just focus on one small part so you can see like this big flow structure right here. And, this works almost similarly to the different erosion nodes that we have. So you have duration, which controls the overall simulation length. So if I increase it, it just runs for a longer time, creates a more detailed effect. Strength is, you can see that's how it's eating away at the edges, as I described before. Coverage is a bit more interesting because we don't normally get that in erosion. So let me go with really low coverage so you can see. It leaves a lot of the shapes alone. It will start targeting just the weakest shapes. And then as you increase coverage, it starts affecting other parts as well. And the effect right now is a bit subtle because some of our other settings are quite low. But we'll come back to coverage and you can see how it works with a deeper strength. Then we have anisotropy. So anisotropy, I know some people find that word a bit too technical, but really it's just uniform and non-uniform. So with uniform or low anisotropy or just isotropy, it affects erosion everywhere. Whereas with a higher value, or well, here a medium value, it affects some of the weaker crevices, and then it goes for the larger flow structures. And then at very high values, it's focused more on the deeper parts of the valley, and you can use that to expand certain structures. So I'm going to go back to something a bit more medium. Okay, that works. And then we have rock hardness, which I have been known to abuse a few times. Excuse me. So the rock hardness basically is kind of like an inhibitor. It prevents the erosion from taking away too much. So if I don't have much rock hardness, the whole thing gets affected. It's it's just like rock softness in your normal erosion. And if you go with a bit more hardness, the crevices get affected more, the normal surface gets left alone a bit. Because if you remember, as I was showing before, it starts this erosion starts affecting from the crevices and broken structures and then eating away outwards. So that's what rock erosion does. So even now, like if I just change the settings a bit, you can see how it's eating away. And then finally, we have down cutting. This is kind of like a force multiplier for this whole thing. So with high down cutting, this is just like down cutting in the normal erosion node. It's how deep these new erosive crevices go. So if I go really high, you can see it starts just tearing apart the landscape. And with a lower value, it's less of that effect. It works great with depth because they're both similar, but they don't really do the exact same thing. So let's see, if I do a lot of depth, you can see that's not the same as down cutting. This is just like, plummeting everything further down. So if I have a low depth, but then a lot of down cutting, that gives me better control. So between the two of these, you can get the kind of shape that you want. So I'm gonna reduce this a bit and this as well. That looks good. Yeah, that's good enough for a basic scene. And the next step would be, let's see if we can get a bit more by adding another crumble. So you can see now this is affecting everything quite strongly, and we don't want it to be that all pervasive really. So I'll reduce the depth a bit, but increase the down cutting, have it spread a bit more with or less rather with coverage. So that, oh yeah, so I was going to show you that. So let me increase down cutting and depth. Okay, not that much, that's way too much. And now if I reduce the coverage, you can see it's going for the weak structures a lot more. And then with the high coverage, you can see how it starts expanding. So again, we'll keep this low for now. And I will change the down cutting back so it's not that prominent. So yeah, this looks good. So next we can now add a bit of terracing. And in the other one, it was not really complex. Let's do a bit more complex terracing this time. So I will add a fractal terrace node. And let's give it a bit more intensity. And if I go negative on the shape, it pulls it inward. And then if I go higher up, it pushes the terraces outward. And that's what I want for this scene. So I'll go back to like something like 80, 85. And that's starting to work. And then let's add a bit of modulation. So let's create another gradient like I showed in the previous scene. This is quite tall and it's not gonna be too helpful. I'll show you why. So if I add that to the modulation, this is what it does. Now, granted, this could be cool. Actually, there are places like that, like this. There's actually one about 30-40 kilometers from here that's pretty much like this, but we don't want to go this steep. So I will go and in the post-process tag, I will enable clamp and right click and go half. So that's better. And now we get this. I'm going to use one of my favorite little tricks. I'm just going to hit min just to explore this a bit. So what's happening now is with the min mode on, we're getting the lower of both. So like we had this, now we have this, but only here. If I turn this off, you can see what it's creating. I think for now, I'm gonna not do the min effect. This is cool. I wanna explore this a bit more. So let's see, let's add a bit of outcrops. And so this is what I was talking about before. And you know what, before we go too far, I'm going to show you a neat trick on how you can paint any effect, like literally any effect. So instead of using large clusters, I'm just going to go entire surface and hit apply. So this is going to create the rock everywhere. I'm going to change the breakage to medium and the detail to medium as well, because I want this to be a bit more rugged and broken down. And I don't want some of those smoother shapes. So there you go. Now we have these everywhere. So what we're going to do now is put this aside a bit. I'm gonna drag out from the original node, the fractal tears in our case, touch it to the output from the outcrops. It'll create a combiner. It's a shortcut, much faster than having to go, drag one and connect the two. I'm gonna switch this to 100% blending. And you can see, no, that's not useful, but we will bring in a mask for control. And so to do that, I will right click and type in mask, and right now there's nothing on it, so we can't see it. I will drag and connect this to the mask input of the combine node. And so now you can see it went back to the original because our mask is blank. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a shape, and that part will be used as the mask, so the outcrops will start showing through. Now, it requires a lot of back and forth, and we don't want to do that. We actually want to see in real time what's happening. So I will go to the combine node, right click it and select pin. You can also press F. This now locks our preview to this node. So I can go to mask, I can click edit, and I can start painting here, but I get to see the end result. So this whole ridge line, I want that to have rocks. So I just paint a line here, and there you go, it has rocks. Let's do something here that has rocks. I think let's take a look. This area could use a bit of rocks. So right here. And sometimes if you're having trouble navigating, which part is which, you can turn on the reference grid. So this, you can use the color locators to see which part you're working in. So it's helpful. You can right click and there are other options. You can load custom images, you can change the transparency and so on. So anyways, this is how you can paint any effect. Instead of outcrops, I could use something else. I could use a different erosion, whatever. This gives you this tremendous flexibility to go in and paint a specific effect exactly where you want it, and not have to worry about like creating convoluted networks of nodes to make it happen. So yeah, now I'm not going to use this. I want a bit of randomness in this one. So I'm gonna select these and delete. Go back to our outcrops. And like in the previous scene, I'm gonna go for small clusters. Turn off the 2D viewport. So there, it randomly created these protruding clusters. One neat trick with the outcrops node is that you don't always need to have them be protruding. You can lower that amount and they become squashed, and they can become even inverted and become part of the terrain. So if I go completely zero on protrusion and hit apply, you can see it's affecting the landscape, like these little mismatched stairs or some sort of broken stratification. So that's a great way to have that as well. I'm going to go back to having protrusion, because for our purpose right now, we want to have these rocks. And now we're going to add our second terracing. And this time we're not going to modulate it the same way. So the reason I'm adding a second terracing is that we want this angled one and this straight one to fight. Because that does happen in real life. There you will have tectonic movements that will push different mountains, rock formations, what have you, against each other, and they will be tilted, they'll be broken, there's uplift. So for things like that, we want to mix it up. So with the fractal terrace, the second one, it's going horizontal. I'm going to increase the shape so it matches with our previous pattern. So like so. But they're still not fighting, really. To make them fight, we will use the min mode, like I showed before. And so now we can start recovering some of the previous tilted strata. So if I turn this off again, you can see we're gaining some of this stuff back. Now it's a matter of playing with the seed a bit to see what works, what doesn't. And you can also change the spacing a bit. Oh, there you go. So can I have this going on? Another way we can do this is we can go really low on the spacing. I'm going to increase the intensity just a bit. So you can start breaking these. You can see this big straight angle, you can start breaking it a bit. And of course, you can always mask these effects. I don't want to go too low on the spacing or the intensity. I will right click and reset this. And let me find something that works. That looks good. We get this, and we get these horizontal ones. So now this is more or less complete terrain. I'll very quickly show you how I would texture this. So first I'll just add a texture node which creates this mask through which we can flow different color ramps. You can make your own. I prefer using the sat maps node, which has like literally hundreds and hundreds of different nodes that color maps that you can use. We're not seeing shading, so I have to go to the fractal terrace, right click and click pin as underlay. So now when we go to a flat map, it will use this terrain as the surface underneath. At the bottom of the Rocky collection, in the last couple of builds, we added I forget how many exactly, but there are like a couple of hundred new sat maps, both in Rocky and in the green libraries. So I'll pick something very sandstony here. Like so. I'm going to use the bias to push it around a bit. And it's just spreading it across this map that the texture node created for us. So that's good, but I want to mix it up. So I'm going to create one more. And let's pick something else. Maybe something like this. That's not too bad. Kind of matches this enough. And then from the last height field, I will create an occlusion node. So I'll just search and create that. And I think I want it to be inverted just so I can get a better look. And then I will use the shaper, this thing here, in the post-process stack to increase the intensity. Now I'll connect these two, creates a combined node like we did before, and then I will feed the occlusion into the mask, make it 100% blend. There you go. And so now we can see it's starting to show through. And this, I want to expand a bit more, so I will increase the occlusion. There you go. So now it's coming through. I think this color may not be enough. I will look for something else. Maybe something with a bit of green. There you go, that's starting to show through. And since we're adding green, let's add a bit of vegetation. So from the fractal terrace, I'm going to add an arboreal node. Excuse me. So this is the new node. It creates superficial trees. You can read more about it on the blog. It has a wide variety of options on how you can grow it and what kind of trees you can create. So the main three types that you can create right now are conifers, broadleaf, and shrubs. So for our purposes, I'm going to go with shrubs. I don't want tall vegetation on this terrain. So it's starting to create these, but these are too small. So I am going to change the style from small to large and fuzzy, because we want our distant vegetation to be, large and fuzzy. And since this is the desert, these plants will actually seek out water, which tends to be more in shadowed areas and crevices. So I will choose the growth to seek flows instead of avoid them. So now it's going to hide a bit more than just be outside everywhere. I'm also going to increase the slope to 45 degrees. So I'll type in 45 and that'll let it grow a bit more. You can control the health of the vegetation. So right now this is decent enough. If you want fewer plants, you can reduce the health. And I think I'm going to increase the flows so that it can have more places to grow. But I don't want it everywhere. I want this to be more consolidated. So I want the flows to be fewer and not everywhere. So I'll increase this a lot. And oh, I should reduce the flows just a bit. So there, it's now restricted to where the larger flows are. And I think that's all we need for the moment. We might add more in a little bit. So to color these, you get a mask called the color guide, and I will just create an FX node just so we can examine what this looks like. So this is the color guide, and we don't really have too much detail in this. It's just a boundary mask. So what we would do is just take any random texture or this texture or just like a Berlin noise, doesn't really matter. Depends on your scene and your preference. I'm just going to use this, and I'm going to create one more sat map node, and I will pick something from the green library. So something like this. This seems like it would work for desert vegetation, and it doesn't look much right now. So but rather than working within this little tiny mask, what I prefer to do is just create one large map and then blend them together. So we'll connect these two, and then for the mask, we will feed it this. Go 100%. Get to see these. Oh, and I need to change my underlay. So right click the Arboreal node and bin this so we can see the vegetation. And there you go, it started adding this vegetation now. And so with this, you can easily add a bunch of different vegetation. So if, let's say, you wanted to add more, I will chain one more node. Let's create one more Arboreal node. And this time, instead of the shrubs, I'll just do broadleaf. Now, this area would not really have broadleaf, but this is kind of like a slightly generic looking plant, just enough that we can get away with it. So the health thing that I was talking about, let me show you that. So if I reduce the health to 15%, you can see it's not that lush. The vegetation is not dense anymore. The pockets are smaller. And unlike the other one where we were seeking the flows, I'm going to have this avoid the flows. I'm also going to reduce the slope at which it grows. So now we have this. And so all of these things here, these are inhibitors. And let's say you wanted a custom one like these. So we have flows. So by default, if it says avoid flows, it's not going to grow where normal rainwater goes through quite forcefully, or where snow might gather. So if I increase this, you can see there are fewer and fewer patches. And if I consolidate the flows, which we didn't see it that well in the other one, but with this, it brings it closer. It reduces smaller flows. So let me show you what the smaller flows would look like. Oh, I guess I don't have enough health to make it that visible. So I'll temporarily increase the health, and I will also increase the slope. Okay, so if I reduce the flows just a bit, and so with a smaller flow, the less consolidated flows, you can see there's a flow pattern going here and here and here and here and here and pretty much everywhere. If we consolidate it, it starts growing less in the larger flow zones and more in the main flow zones. I think because I have so many deep crevices, it's a bit hard to see. But there are some very good examples that we put up on the blog, so you can check out those. For now, I'll try to recover what we had before. So reduce the health and reduce the slope a bit. And then to add more randomness, I'm going to have like random patches disappear. So there you go. And then maybe I'll go a little bit less. The chaos slider is interesting because it can take these existing shapes, which can sometimes look quite uniform, and then it can break up the boundary for that. And so it eats away at the edges, so you have fewer and fewer plants. It's really good when you have large populations, you want to kind of break it up a bit. I'll show you a different example of that in a moment. And then lastly, the smooth, it kind of just spreads out and blurs the edges. So sometimes you'll lose a few trees maybe. You can always compensate with some of these other things. And so all of these things, these are inhibitors, and you also have the option to have custom inhibitors. So let me quickly demonstrate that by creating just a fresh node so that we don't mess this up. I'm just gonna leave this as is. And let's see, I will create something rudimentary like a radial gradient. And so with this, if I attach it here, you'll see there's no growth in here. And because it's a gradient or soft map, it's affecting it like so. If I were to make it stronger, say like this, actually I'll turn off equalize and we'll just leave it like this. Then you can see nothing grows here. And if I pin it here and scale it down, there you go. So you can paint anything. You can use different things like angle or other relevant things to your terrain. And while we're on this node, let me show you. So a couple of things to be aware of. These are not like, these trees are not meant to be like replacements for actual vegetation that you can grow in CG apps or your game engines. So what this helps with is if you have a distant terrain, like say maybe a skybox or just a simple distant terrain in a moving shot or something like that, well, this is a lot cheaper to get vegetation in there. And it also helps to see vegetation while you're working in this. Then you can export the map if you want. You can also bake the trees into your height field. That also works depending on your situation. One of the advantages you get is, even in this low resolution, you can see if I zoom in, the custom renderer that Gaia has, which you can also control through the light node, it can make soft shadows for even these small superficial trees, which can be helpful in many instances. So with these superficial trees, like if you have a moving shot or something, kind of like the one that we started with today, it can save you a lot of resources and render time. So this whole thing came up because a certain studio needed to get a fast shot done. They needed to have certain vegetation, and they already had a very, very complex terrain. And so we built this, and then it expanded from there. Now, I'll leave this alone. Maybe we can use it later for something else. We have the two different patches. I'm gonna reduce the chaos because I don't want our patches to be this small, and maybe I'll increase the health a bit too. Because I think the second node, I wanted to control denser patches. So let's see, I'll reduce the flows just a bit and increase the slopes just a bit. There we go. So our first one is giving us this, second one is giving us this. And we can now combine the two maps, this one, and switch to max mode, blend it fully, and feed that here. Switch our underlay to this, and we now have both. And yeah, that's pretty much how the other terrain that we were looking at was built. We'll add some of these files, we'll clean them up, and we'll add them in the quick starts in one of the next releases, so you can play with them. And as I mentioned, all these nodes are available right now, so you can go ahead and start playing with them as you see, and there's still a bit of time, so if you have feedback, we're happy to see if we can incorporate it. So I think Dylan, how much time do we have? Oh, 10 minutes. So, I think your mic's still muted.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
I like talking to myself, and my sanity's dwindling. So, yeah, we got about 10 minutes. So we have some questions from the community. If you want to take some time to answer them and go over some of the questions, I have some documented here. If you want to go over them.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Okay. Okay. So we got the first question. I think it's already been answered, but Ma Ann at the beginning asked if crops is in the bleeding edge already. It is the outcrops node.
Yes.
Yep. So that one's available right now. Yeah. If you wanna play with it.
Pretty much everything. Not pretty much. Literally everything that's being shown here today. It's all available right now.
Ty asked if outcrops is essentially a different method or a replacement for the embed on combine. I don't think it is, but...
So the main difference would be with embed, you could take any shape and embed it into any other shape. With outcrops, it grows this very, very specific shape, and it decorates your existing terrain with these rocks. So it actually generates a shape, while embed needs a shape that you already have.
So it's like its own actual feature rather than relying on a different feature.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just a whole look dev node.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. A good question from Ty there. CNV91 asked, is it possible to bring in a custom mesh and use nodes and modify it? Currently not, but custom bringing in a mesh is something that's like in the planning stages, right?
Yes, that's one of the last features we're working on right now for this release. And you will be able to import any OBJ file, provided it's not too dense. And then what Gaia will do, it'll do like a Z depth projection, and then it'll transform it into a height field, which you can keep in your graph and then do whatever you want with it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something that a lot of people have asked about is the mesh import. There's been a couple of them that have asked that today. So knowing that it's kind of being planned puts it a
Yeah.
little bit,
It's
I know,
it's
more into
it's one of
perspective.
those features that everyone wants. We want it, but just for one reason or another keeps getting pushed back. But it's finally gonna make it this time.
Nice. Yes, pumped. Okay, so Ghetto Mining asked if there is trees or tools for exporting like the tree masks and the shrubs and stuff. The Arboreal node actually has the tree mask output
Yes.
that you can put an output node file and connect it to, so you can export that. But you also have vegetation and the distribution data node. So those are a couple ways that you can export those. Is that
So
something that you want to like show them real quick, Dax, on how they can do that?
yeah, so I just attached an FX node just so we can see the output from the tree mask. So unlike the color guide, which is like solid and fat, this gives you nuanced little exact locations for everything is. And one of the cool things you can do is instead of the FX, if I put in like a measure node and switch it to point cloud, you can actually export this as a point cloud. And often that can be more useful than a flat map, but you can also use it as a flat map. I know there are so many scatter software like Forest Pack and so on that can use this data. uh,
Yeah, there you
and
go.
and I also want to mention, I think I read this, that uh, there's like an older data map called growth, and you can use that to generate masks. But the big difference is with the Arboreal node, we actually wrote a whole simulation system. And I won't really take too much time with this, but I'll just create like a simple slope noise to demonstrate. And I'll add a wizard just so we have erosion and a flow. So something like this. So if I add an arboreal node to this, and I'll make the trees large so we can see them, because in the other terrain, it was so full of crevices, it wasn't that visible. But if you think of this like an alpine environment, you can see it's honoring the flows very precisely. And if I were to just go ahead and add a river on top of this, you can see the trees are more or less completely avoided. So the Arboreal node has like this the most sophisticated growth algorithm out of everything. So the growth and vegetation nodes, they are more for just like it's like carpet bombing. It's just going to create things that are random with like slight simulation. So that's the main difference. And whenever possible, now that we have the Arboreal node, I would recommend using that over the other ones.
Yeah, you get a lot of like we were discussing a little earlier, a lot of more enhanced features like the floodplains. Like right there,
Yeah,
when you hook up the rivers to it, it creates more realistic floodplains where the rivers flow through things rather than being kind of tossed everywhere.
yeah, exactly.
Um, we have a question from Official K's about an ETA on tiled builds being 100% working.
I would say
Is
try
that
it
something we
out
can
on this.
expand on?
Try it out on this build. I think most of the bugs have been addressed, and the only thing that's remaining are a few convenience features. But as far as the main the feature itself goes for tile builds, it should work in this build.
Okay, so hopefully that answers your question there, Official K's. I know it's some tile builds were something that was kind of like being like I could consider it maybe more beta, I suppose. I've had some good experiences with it with the last couple releases though, so hopefully it works out for you.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think there's also
there's
like, given that it's the slightly unique way that Gaia does tile build. Um, I think later on we'll do some videos on very specific things about tile build so people can see what options they have and how to go about doing it.
yeah, that could be something we could put in the itinerary for sure. I'd be interested in seeing something like that myself.
Yeah.
Um, something that's popped up in the last couple weeks, actually. They brought Travis Howell here brought up a possibility of continent-sized maps, but that's something that other community members have been asking in the last couple weeks. I tried to showcase how they could do that with an island, setting the terrain definitions. But do you have like a good way of explaining how continental-sized maps can be made? You're kind of limited in the terrain definitions in Gaia to about was 100,000 kilometers, which is still large, but not quite continental large.
Right.
Would you have any say on how somebody could go about doing that?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. One is this is without sounding too meta about this, the height and scale and what we have in the terrain definition is in some ways so completely fake. But then again, everything in CG is fake. So the main thing you want is the height to scale ratio. So if you look at the documentation, there's a detailed section on scale. And if you find out what your height to scale ratio is for your continent, you could simulate the same thing with a smaller size. Now, having said that, we did expand this, so you can now go to 100,000 meters on either side. That's quite large. The reason we're not going larger than that is Gaia, or at least Gaia 1, is not meant for super large scale worlds. We were more focused on making it an asset generator for smaller terrains so that for, whether it's games, VFX, whatever, you can use them as, mesh assemblies and create different shapes, things like that. In the future, we will be creating new tooling to create super large scale worlds. For now, I think, yeah, with islands or just noises that you clip and then having the large scale here, that's the best way to go about creating continent size stuff. The only problem there would be that Gaia currently has limited tooling when it comes to zooming in. So you may not be able to create too much detail inside, depending on what your workflow is.
Okay. Hopefully that answers your question. I tried explaining that there's a if you guys are coming from the Discord, there was a island that I posted. It's called Dragon Face Island because it looks like an island that looks like a dragon face. When you open that up, everything looks like it's kind of squashed a little bit. The height, the scale is not very large, but the features are large on are smaller on a larger scale to kind of help fake a continental sized world, I suppose. So if you're on the Discord, you can go ahead and look for that and download it and play with it and change it around however you want. That will give you a good idea on where to start. But taking Dax's explanations and words into account, there's other ways you can kind of work around that. Okay, let's see here. We got everybody came in with like a million questions right towards the end. So trying to pick the ones that haven't already been asked here. Is there any form of bridge for Unreal or Unity? I think there was one for Houdini, but not for Unity or Unreal. Is that something you can expand on?
Yeah, so the Houdini bridge, actually the fantastic people at Side Effects actually built that, and we worked with them to make it happen. Right now, we don't have any official bridges with any other software, although if there are community members interested, the documentation for making it is in in the official documentation, and we're happy to help. I think with Gaia 2, there will be bridges to almost all the big popular applications and game engines. Right now, though, a manual export is pretty much the only way.
Okay. And I think that will answer the next question that came up from Official K's again. Any news on what features Gaia 2 will have? I think there's a lot of them that are still kind of like in the planning phases. So I don't know how much you can expand on a lot of those, but that's definitely the bridge support is definitely one of those that will intrigue a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Gaia 2 is, obviously there's not a lot I can share at this point. We're still planning. We have like, I'll tell you this. Even in Gaia 1, even before Gaia 1, when we have an idea for a feature, it doesn't become part of the main application. We kind of prototype it separately, and then we try to see how we can bend it, what we can get out of it, and see how it works in the real world with like manual exports and so on. And we have right now about, I kid you not, over 100 different prototypes. And we're trying so many different things, but the main goal of Gaia 2 is going to be making terrains is going to be a lot easier, and you'll probably say, hey, why didn't you guys just do this in the first place? It's going to be that easy. But as we get closer, we'll be able to share more. But you can expect more of the same that we always bring, like fantastic shape generators, so you don't have to wrangle noises into something that looks like a terrain. You're going to have more of erosion, maybe a little bit of the GPU stuff, and at least 4 confirmed surprises, but you'll have to tune into later feeds or live streams for that.
All right, fair enough. I think that about wraps it up. We're running a little bit behind schedule on this one, but just one more question, because I think this one pertains to a lot of questions asked recently. Is will there be the ability to export height maps and custom resolutions in any future builds, or is that planned for maybe Gaia 2?
Yes, in Gaia 2 you will have custom resolutions, including non-square shapes. There are going to be certain limitations, but nothing that'll be too complicated. In fact, right now you can kind of do it. You just need to run a crop afterwards. Yeah, we'll make it a lot easier to do in Gaia.
That'll be like you make your world, make it larger than what you anticipate, and then crop out what you don't need.
Yeah, exactly.
After you export it from Gaia.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, there's that Quixel created that beautiful rebirth video with the Icelandic terrain and everything, the car going towards this futuristic building, and I was brought in to create a top-down shot, and it was a long view. It's like your typical Panavision frame, and you're looking at it top down, so it's so long and horizontal, and they wanted the terrain to fit in that. And I actually ended up building a larger terrain, and they're just cropping it in the middle. It's actually surprisingly gives you more options, because kind of like with cropping a picture afterwards, you get more composition options.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that was kind of like a workflow back in old World Machine days, was kind of cropping out what you didn't need if you needed something more rectangular, or something not quite square.
Yeah.
It seems like the workflow kind of moves into even today's day and age with a lot of workflows and CG applications.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't think there's any other questions that kind of popped up that hasn't already been answered anyway. So it seems like the community did a really good job at answering each other's questions for the most part.
Yeah. I think one thing, I got a few comments, and I can, now that I'm looking at the chat, like, for specific stuff, like a specific software, whether it's Blender or Unity or Unreal, and how to export, we're gonna talk more about that. I actually wrote this on Instagram as well. It's like, well, 2 things. One, I'm not really that experienced in Unreal to create stuff. Neither are any other people on the team. We just kind of know the rudimentary stuff. And the other is just given the just time limitations, we can't get into different software. But we are going to focus on bringing in community experts from the community and set up some tutorials, um, and we'll set up a form or something. People can vote for what they want the most, and then we'll try to prioritize that way. Yeah.
We have a lot of really interesting, intriguing things coming down the pipeline. We just got to kind of work out the variables a bit more and see how well those work out. So hopefully you guys will be interested in tuning in for some of those things as well.
It's the usual problem, not enough hours in the day.
Yes. Well, especially now, when you're running on only a couple hours of sleep. So it seems like things kind of drag on and on when you're so tired. I don't think there's
like,
anything else though.
Okay, then
Go ahead.
no, I was just saying it's a perfect way to end the day because we released 1311, and like been so eager to get this out so people can start using it, and ending it with this is just perfect.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. I'm going to be busting out a bunch of stuff in the new release. I downloaded it during the stream because I hadn't been able to do that today. So I'm going to go ahead and poke around in it. If you guys have any further questions post stream, again in the forums or the Discord, you can post in the areas that I've created for it, and then I can see if I can get you answers post stream. But other than that, I think we're going to end the stream here, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and we'll hopefully see you in the next one when we get around to it. We're going to try to make it a monthly thing if possible. So
Wait.
I don't have anything else to add.
I guess we just say goodbye.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you guys later.
All right. Take care, everyone.